In this video, I'm going to try to outline the steps for creating quiz questions inside of As You Learn. And there is a lot to this, but I'm going to try to stick with kind of the broad overview. I'm not going to try to cover each of the individual question types, but you'll find some of that information in this faculty support site. But I think I'm going to just try to stick with sort of the general steps that might get you started with the process of creating categories and quiz questions for quizzing inside of As You Learn. So what I've done is I've gone into a site where I am the teacher, and I'm going to look up here at the top right-hand corner for my gear menu. And within this, I'm going to look for the bottom option for the more. On this page, I'm going to look towards the bottom for the area that has question bank. You'll notice I have links here for questions, categories, import, and export down here at the bottom. I'm going to start with categories, and I'm going to suggest that starting with categories is a good idea. The more questions you have, the more this organization is needed. So although you could start with creating questions, the more questions you get, the more you'll find that you need these categories to help you sort them. So I'm going to click on categories. I have a default here always for my categories, and I also have already created a chapter 1 category. What I'm going to do next is to create a chapter 2 and click on the button for add category, and I've done that. Notice that in parentheses you'll see the number of questions in this category. And again, you can go back to questions and organize and move your questions around. You can delete questions from here, but it's much easier if you've divided them up into categories. I just created category 2, so there are no questions in this. I'm going to go ahead and start creating my questions for category 2 now by clicking on the button for create a new question. Again, there's a lot of different question types, and I'm not going to go over all of them in this video, but I want you to see how many options that you have in this menu. You're going to click on the radio button by the question type that you want to create. I'm going to go with multiple choice. There's a brief statement over here to the side that explains what type of quiz question type I've selected. I'm going to click on the button for add. And there's going to be a lot of elements to this question, but I'm going to stick with some of the broad required parts of these questions. You know, if you hover over this, you see the little star. It means that there are required fields that I must complete. I'm going to start with the question name, and I'm going to type that in. The question name is what's going to appear in the question bank for you, and this will help you identify and organize your question. I would suggest that while this doesn't have to be a long statement, just a short phrase would work. If you have a lot of questions that deal with the same kind of theme, it's a good idea to maybe make some kind of note that distinguishes it from the other questions that might be similar to it. So my question is going to be about the first president, and next I'm going to type in my question here in the question text. This is the area that the students will see as their quiz question. All right, so now I have my question typed in there. General feedback is shown to the students once they complete the question, but there are some options for more specific feedback based on the answer they gave down here further down in my quiz question creation. So I'm not going to put anything in here for general feedback. I chose multiple choice, and I have the option now for whether there's one or multiple answers that are correct. And I need to make sure that I designate that here. And I also have the option for shuffling my choices. We have this checked by default, and we would encourage you to shuffle these choices. This means that the order of the answers is going to be randomly shuffled on each quiz attempt. So I'm going to stick with the default here. I'm also going to stick with the default for number of choices, and I'm going to scroll down to my answers area. Now, if I have only one answer, then the percentage of this would only apply to one correct answer. So my one correct answer is going to be at 100%. But if I had selected a quiz question for multiple choice that had multiple correct answers, kind of like a checkbox where there's 2 or 3 correct answers, this is where I would allocate this to maybe have 33% correct for 3 different questions, or maybe 50-50. It's only important that you do give 100% of the credit before you save this question. All right, so you'll see I've gone ahead and added some of my one of my answers. So I have my correct answer, and then I have a couple of distractors here. George Washington is my correct answer, so I'm going to put that at 100%. I'm going to just leave these as none. Notice that the feedback area here is where I could put feedback based on the answer that the students have given. So whether it's the correct answer and you're providing some kind of support, or whether you're giving feedback based on an incorrect answer that asks them to revisit some of those materials, you could do so in this area. I'm going to continue to scroll down. Notice that there really is no limit to the number of possible answers that I could put for each question. It stops at 5. I don't have to complete 5. It'll adapt to whatever I put in there, but I can also add more choices by clicking on this button here. And I would encourage you to leave these as the defaults as you start using quiz questions. One other thing I wanted to mention before I move on, I realized that I did not mention the default markup here. The default mark is just the points assigned to the question, and our default is 1, and we recommend keeping that value as 1 unless the question should be worth additional points. So now that I'm done, I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom, and I'm going to click on Save Changes. And now I'll be back here in my question bank, where I'll be able to see now question 2 has a 1 in parentheses for this question. If I want to go back to this, I can always click on this gear here for edit. If I had multiple questions that were very similar to one another in terms of their format or their topic, I could click duplicate, and it would create a copy of that question. I could go in there and edit. If I want to preview it, I can click on this little magnifying glass, and I can fill in with my correct response. Close that preview. And then finally, there's the button here for delete if I decide that this is just not a good question. As always, one of the best ways to get started with this may be to reach out to one of the instructional technology consultants if you have questions about how to get started with this. But hopefully this is a video that will at least cover some of the basics in getting started and might put you on the right path.